We're too much in the head. There's several levels of imbalance. Too much left hemisphere versus right hemisphere where the flow really takes place. Too much in the head versus the heart. Those are two basic ones. When we balance the two and learn to listen to the heart, when we do that, then we come up with wiser questions, more guidance, greater insights.
What could you say about our multidimensionality and how this world might not be the only thing?
What do you do when the world gets you down? You realize this is not the only world. The third phrase is, and this awareness makes all the difference in the world. This, here, now. Aware awareness, being. So what difference does that make? Well, the moment I feel suffering, I shift to it being pure awareness and I say, that's a thought. What thought is causing that suffering? Is that ultimate reality? No, that's a thought. Let's set it aside.
Hello, beautiful humans. Before we dive into today's transmission, I wanted to share something very special and meaningful with you. I've been working on something new for the last few months, and I honestly haven't talked about it in public until now. It's been in the making for a while, and I can't really say too much right now, but honestly, it's one of the most important things that I've ever built. This project is designed to take everything that we talk about here to the next level. If you've ever felt that you've been ready for more, if you feel like there's a missing piece to all of this, then this is for you. Shortly, I'm gonna host my first ever live event where I'm gonna reveal what all of this is about. It's free, but you need to sign up. There's a link in the description, or you can scan the QR code on screen right now. It's happening very soon, and I want everyone to be a part of this very sacred moment. This is for us. Enjoy the episode, and I love all of you so much. Suzanne Giesemann, welcome back on Just Tap In. What are you most excited about right now globally and in your life?
I'm excited, Emilio, that more and more people are coming to realize that our stories are not the real us. We're in a time of such chaos, but I don't think that that's particularly new for humans. Chaos is part of why we came here. But more people are willing to be open to the fact that there's more than the chaos. There's more than this human life. And I'm just excited to be a messenger like you that feels that calling and is answering the call to help other people realize who we are.
Mm-hmm. And it almost seems like there's been an acceleration of consciousness since we last spoke, which was about 2 years ago on this show. And I wanted to ask you if you feel that humanity is entering a space and a time when that veil from this human reality to the greater reality is dissolving even greater, and we're accessing new states.
I absolutely do, Emilio. I've been teaching people how to connect with higher consciousness and connect with loved ones who have passed for at least 8 years now, if not longer. And more people are making the connection, which is funny because that's the title of my new book, but that's the goal, to show people that we can connect with higher consciousness because we are souls now, not just when we die. And more people are making that connection because the veil is thinning. So it's a combination of the human species field taking on that awareness as a whole and coming into alignment with higher energies.
You've said that according to Spirit, the most important question that you can ask is, who am I? And then you've said that that answer will change as you evolve. So I'm really curious to know how for you, that question of who am I has evolved most recently.
Most recently, I mean, just in the last week, a deeper understanding that when I say I face a choice. Is it the soul saying I, or is it the one who identifies as Suzanne Giesemann? I've known this, but now truly owning the fact that it's okay to say, I am the soul speaking now. And as long as I align with truth and love and beauty and kindness and compassion, I'm holding that soul awareness. And I can make a choice at any time to up level or just remain in the story of Suzanne.
Mm. You brought up the word chaos in the beginning, and there's this notion that you've been teaching recently about being the eye of the storm. And I'm really curious to know also how you differentiate when someone has become the storm and that becomes their life, to then getting initiated into becoming the eye that is in the center of the storm. How do we make that shift?
We find the center within ourselves through periods of stillness that are not necessarily silent, but carving out time, if only a few minutes a day, to sit quietly, to set your phone aside, to set all devices aside, any interruptions, and just be. So few people know how to just be. And as you are sitting as this self, you observe the thoughts and you notice how in between the thoughts there's this total peace. But when you latch on to a thought, you go right back out into the swirling maelstrom. So it's finding that space and saying, wow, this is right here. If I make the choice to find it, and notice how I'm going to the heart, just like you recognize that's the center of the 0 point field, we can call it in scientific terms, where we're attached to all other center points. So if we can all just access that place in ourselves and realize other people have it as well, lead them to find it, then we can find peaceful solutions to the storms that naturally arise.
And in the beginning of that process that you say, finding the center of ourselves, we might take some time in our life to, in a way, isolate ourselves. And that is commonplace in a spiritual path. But you've been saying that the time of the lone wolf is over. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm in the middle right now of a 12,000-mile tour around the U.S., sharing a documentary called Wolf's Message. And Wolf is not about the animal. It's a young man who took the nickname Wolf. And he was struck and killed by lightning and came back to me when I connected with his parents and shared a message for all of humanity about how we are out of balance. We're too much in the head. There's several levels of imbalance. Too much left hemisphere versus right hemisphere, where the flow really takes place. Too much in the head versus the heart. Those are two basic ones. When we balance the two and learn to listen to the heart, which I see you doing after I finish talking, each time I finish, you don't jump right in. You're not already thinking of an answer. You're waiting for it to arise from the heart. When we do that, then we come up with wiser questions, more guidance, greater insights. Too few people are doing that these days. That's why we're out of balance. So the time of the lone wolf is over comes from, it's right in the documentary Wolf's Message. Another book that I was led to read, Tribe of Many Colors, where the author, Keisha Crowther, was aware of this imbalance. And it was just interesting that I was led by Wolf to read that book. And there's this phrase, the time of the lone wolf is over, meaning we need to get out of me, it's all about me, and realize that we need to work together and with the higher beings that are available to help us to find peace and tranquility.
When I finished watching that documentary from Wolf, it was the most goosebumping, chilling story that I've heard. And it took a toll on me. Like, we saw each other the next day and I was still in that energy field of integrating such magic and miracles that Wolf was able to create in his life. And I was meaning to ask you this, and I'm just feeling it's the right time to ask, is do you feel like there was a message or a story from Wolf that didn't make it onto the film that is still living really presently in your heart?
In actuality, we made sure all the messages that were important to share were in there. There are little details. I have a book, Wolf's Message, that the documentary is based upon. Lots of details that will help people, but the main messages, the biggest wows, what I call no other explanation moments, then that we're not only human and we're part of one web, they made it into the film because the director, Jim Spruill, and I worked very, very closely together to make sure we didn't miss anything.
And that term, no other explanation moments, you said that scientifically, it's proven that hearing stories of others' experiences not only expands your own beliefs, but also opens you to have similar experiences. So I'd love to just set the tone and the space for you to tell us one of your NOE experiences that you feel could really activate someone to bring these experiences, these metaphysical, mystical experiences into their own life.
Well, the greatest NOE that I've ever encountered is told in Wolf's story. And I'll just tell it right now, because as we were talking before we went on the air, I've been watching this film over and over at in-person screenings around the country, watched it 15 times so far. And I never fail to hear the biggest one and just say, I hope this is blowing people's minds right now, because Wolf was struck and killed by lightning, but a day or two, no more than 2 days before he passed, we know this happened at this point because his father went through Wolf's entire apartment and did not see the poem and drawing that Wolf made before he passed. So it was made between his father's visit and the time he was killed by lightning. He wrote a poem that has both a prophetic last line and the drawing. The last line of the poem is, "It is time for the light of nature to free my soul." The light of nature, of course, being lightning. But in the drawing, it's very symbolic. I won't get into all the elements, but one of the elements shows a tree, and it's the precise tree where he was struck and killed by lightning. He was meditating underneath of it. And then at the base of the tree, you see he's drawn 2 flowers. Well, his parents, when they went to the site of his death, didn't know how to honor him while waiting to get his body back from the coroner. And so they went to a florist who gave them 2 roses. They took them to the tree and planted them there at the base of the tree. Not a family tradition, nothing anybody planned to do. Yet Wolf drew a picture of that tree with the 2 flowers at the base of it, exactly how they were planted. Can I give you just the other 2 little NOEs from that?
Keep going.
Yeah. Well, he also
Keep going.
tacked that the poem and drawing to one of the walls in his room, in his apartment, and set a chair that normally wasn't there right in the middle of the room, out of place, facing the poem, as if to say, sit here and look at this. And then behind it, here come the truth shivers, as we call them already. He cut out his favorite T-shirt, the front of it, that he was wearing the last time his dad saw him, just days earlier. He wore it all the time. He cut out the front of it and tacked it to the wall facing the poem. It was the image of a lightning bolt. This is just the tip of the iceberg of the ways that Wolf showed us, including coming back to me in multiple visits, that we're part of something so much bigger. And this communication is possible because we are aspects of consciousness ourselves. That's the bottom line.
One of those main messages that Wolf left behind is that the soul knows death very differently than the human does. And the fact that he tracked this whole process leading up to that moment where he was struck by lightning and left the message behind tells us that not only did he as a human know that something was going to happen, but a higher aspect of himself was guiding him through that. And why do you feel that when we connect with our higher selves, our life becomes a series of synchronicities, miracles, and even prophetic processes in our life?
Because we are all aspects of one consciousness. So it's this one mind, like prismatically projecting itself into various divisions of itself. So how can the connections not show up? And the more we become aware that we are parts of this web, the more the universe conspires to literally throw these synchronicities into our face. Just quick two examples that I shared in my monthly webinar last month. You and I were together in Gaia Studios recording a wonderful segment of Open Minds show. Before you showed up, I was sitting in the room with the makeup artist, and she said, well, they're doing a special show with Emilio and Meredith together, Regina Meredith together. And she said they wanted to see who would be the best guest to come back and be the test case with those two. And she said, Suzanne, you are the chosen. And I went like this because I said, give me a second. I reached into my briefcase that I brought on this one overnight trip to Colorado for the filming. And I pulled out the paperback I was reading called The Chosen. Yeah. I found it in a campground bathroom. I needed a novel to read on the trip, so I brought it with me. It's not something that I selected. It was a strange book that okay, it was interesting, but there she says it, and I started laughing. I thought, well, there's a good synchronicity. So minutes later, I walk out of the makeup room and into the back room of the studio, and the sound guy stands there and he goes, oh, Suzanne is back. And he stands up and he starts dancing around singing the Pointer Sisters song, I'm so excited. And my jaw dropped because in the sedan on the way to the studio, I watched a film that my husband sent me in a meme. It was a clip from Chevy Chase's National Lampoon movie, and they were playing the Pointer Sisters, I'm so excited. All of this within minutes of each other. This is the kind of in-your-face synchronicity that in that moment said to me, Suzanne, you're in the right place. It's the right time. You're on track. That's what synchronicities do.
Mm. And it really confirms that experience. It's wild to me because there was also a series of synchronicities for me in that whole experience. I'll share just a few, but it really confirms that when spirit wants people to come together, it will make sure that those people are in the right place, in the right time, and that the human can digest these certain signs that for us are a little bit pattern interrupts in our reality, where it's like, what? Like the book, the song, and then for me, it was, we were talking in that episode about the initiation that you had with lightning, and you were wearing a fulgurite rock, which is the rock that's formed after lightning strikes. The next person I talked to you after that was wearing a fulgurite as well. And then the next time I went to the gym, there was a man wearing a shirt with a wolf on it. I didn't tell you this one, but there it is, the wolf, the fulgurite, the lightning. Drawing back into...
May I add one more?
For sure.
Because this one blew my mind. Mm-hmm. So I went straight from the studio to the airport to fly back to pick up the rest of our Wolf's Message tour with my husband in Albany, New York. I had a lot of time in the airport. So I found a quiet space and did a Zoom meeting with a woman who was advising me about distribution for the documentary. We spent an hour talking, and she said, Wolf's artwork reminds me of artwork from my community in Santa Fe, New Mexico, from a group called Meow Wolf. She said, have you ever heard of it? I said, Meow Wolf. No. She said, oh, it's a movement, but very unusual art, much like wolves. And I said, well, I'll have to look it up. So I finished this talk with her in the Denver airport, close my computer, start walking to find my gate, come within 1 minute, face to face with a kiosk in the Denver airport of Meow Wolf stuff. Artwork, t-shirts, little tchotchkes. And there was this sign of 5 different, like a street sign, like this way to Denver, blah, blah, blah. But it had Houston. It had 4 places that we're going on our Wolf's Message tour. There was only one of the 5 signs that wasn't a stop on the Wolf's Message tour. And it was Santa Fe, New Mexico, where the woman who told me about Meow Wolf was sitting when we talked. The whole thing was connected. I just looked up and said, okay, I get it. We're on track.
I was going to ask you that. What do you do in those moments of unexplainable synchronicity? Like, what does that do to
Oh,
you?
the first thing I do is give gratitude and just feel this burst of joy and acknowledgement. We're all souls. We're all connected. This is just the web mirroring to each other that hey, these surprises, you may be surprised, but it's natural when you recognize the connection. And the second thing I do is write it down to share it in my monthly webinars because, like you said, stories open people to these experiences themselves. You may miss them until you realize they're signs from the universe.
Mm. Your group of guides, Sanaya, they said that, what do you do when the world gets you down? And then they answered, you realize this is not the only world. And that really segues us into this awareness of our multidimensional self and how we're stepping further into that.
Yeah.
What could you say about our multidimensionality and how this world might not be the only thing? And I know that's sometimes maybe basic information for this audience, but going beyond that, how are we transitioning as a collective into those multidimensional spaces?
There's a third phrase there, what do you do when the world gets you down? You realize this is not the only world. The third phrase is, and this awareness makes all the difference in the world. Because let's go back to September 11th, 2001. I was in the last aircraft in U.S. airspace. I came back to my office building, the Pentagon, staring at that gaping hole. I had no spiritual awareness. I didn't realize that awareness is what connects us. That's another name for consciousness. So I really suffered. Since then till now, my spiritual journey has totally surprised me and taken me to a place where I realize that all that is this here now. Awareness, being. So what difference does that make? Well, the moment I feel suffering, I shift to it being pure awareness and I say, that's a thought. What thought is causing that suffering? Is that ultimate reality? No, that's a thought. Let's set it aside. What's a better reaction than going to suffering? You literally shift beyond the story and find that instantly find that peace we were talking about. You don't get caught up in the story and you can come up with better responses. That makes all the difference in the world. Peace in the moment, which raises your consciousness, which increases your connection to this guidance. And we haven't talked about this. We're talking so much about how it helps ourselves, but now we can become what you would understand as well as a tuning fork to those around us. If we're holding peace, other people say, well, why is she not going nuts? Why isn't she losing it? They can just pick up on that energy and remind us all to take a breath and work together and find higher solutions.
You had a really interesting encounter, which was with Odin, the Norse god. And he came and brought you a series of teachings about how these metaphysical teachers operate on the other side and how people are able to see Isis, the goddess, or Odin, Thor, like all of these entities and beings. And what he taught you was that he exists as concepts and patterns fashioned in a form that you would recognize.
That's
so
right.
Going deeper into that notion where we're connecting with the other side, are we just seeing patterns? Are we just seeing concepts? And what's deeper in that awareness?
Deeper in that is sentience. And awareness itself is the ultimate sentience. So it's awareness underneath the patterns that is intelligent and creative. So this is a mythological being. How could I communicate with that? Is it a field, just a field of data? No, it was at some higher level. It is the one, awareness itself, that is patterned into something that we call a story. So my question to Odin, after he gave me evidence about his myth, that I couldn't have known, and I validated, came back again. And my first question for him was, you're a myth. Are you real? And he said, as real as you are, but not human, which was very interesting. And then I said, oh, I got it backwards though. But I said, but you're a myth. And he said, you are a myth. That really took the legs out from under me, because I went, wait a minute, this is true. What are we? We are souls living our stories. We give our story a name, a gender, a family, a culture, fill it with memories, and the story builds. But then we identify with the story and fail to see what's underneath it. So what Odin showed me was, beneath each story is awareness, consciousness. So if it's helpful, if you have a visit from a being, Isis, Odin, Archangel Michael, and you immediately from within your story say, well, that's ridiculous. You can't communicate with stories. You're missing the deeper level of awareness from which all stories arise. So Odin really taught me anything can be created in consciousness. And if it provides healing, information, guidance, then use it.
I just looked up the definition of myth, and it's strange because it says that it's a widely held but false belief or idea. Keyword there, false. And we're here saying that it's real. So how does this definition of myth contradict your definition of what a myth is?
Point of view. From the human and a body point of view, a myth is false. From the soul's point of view, a myth is a story, just like a human lifetime is a story. So you just change and shift your point of view. That's what he's trying to tell us. So when we're stuck within our own story, that's an even more limited point of view than the human point of view. It's segmented, more restricted. The more we expand our point of view to oneness, now anything is possible. And that's how we came to be, because this one mind said, what if? And created this reality. Now together, we answer that question. What if we make this choice? What if we make that choice? It all comes down to choices, but they're all made in consciousness.
And from that soul's perspective, how would you define sentience?
Awareness. It's awareness. That's the awareness. That's the knowing I am, I exist, and I know it.
Yeah. I brought that up also because with the advent of AI, there's been a large polarity within, especially within the spiritual community around if AI is sentient, conscious, can it bring through deep messages from soul? And then there's the materialist reductionist view of, no, that's just a robot with no heart. How do you view sentience as it relates to this new technology that is coming through for humanity right now?
Oh, sentience is the key. That once you realize that you can be inspired from your higher self, the soul, which is part of even higher, the oversoul, and then the one, as you sit to interact with artificial intelligence, you ask that your prompts come from the highest place, and you let your prompts be guided. The answer that comes back is going to come from data, but this is modulated, modified through your awareness, which when you're hooked into the higher self, will then lead to questions which lead to greater insights for you. So it's a tool, but it's not sentient itself. You're the sentient one. The higher self is sentient, even more so. And so when I use AI and I'm getting in the flow, I realize my guides are guiding me to really the deepest questions that are taking me to what I need to know in this moment. But I just turned in about a month ago my next book for Hay House, which is called Always Connected. And it really touches on this use of AI and technology versus going within. And in the book, which will come out next June, I did an experiment where I first asked my guides to channel an answer for me. What is forgiveness? It was a beautiful answer. Then I went to AI using my own inputted information, because we have our own AI bot coming out on my website anytime now. And it's filled with 15 years of channeled wisdom and all of my teaching and all of my YouTube transcripts. So I asked that, specifically tailored to my work, what is forgiveness? And the answer was very similar, but it was missing that personal touch. It was lacking the interactive feeling of flow that we get. It was missing this transmission of energy that readers will feel when they read the one that came direct from spirit, indirectly through me, versus the one that came secondarily indirectly from me through a computer. It's very cool.
Yeah. What else was missing when you asked about specifically forgiveness that your guys channeled, and also what was so different about the answer that AI brought to the surface?
Another thing that was missing was the whole feel of it. It was beautiful, because you can program AI to have a lovely, compassionate response. So that was there. But the creativity, the use of words that my guides use, the turn of a phrase that links back, call that recursive, right? That links back to what was said before, that was missing. Really, it's in the feel, and I know readers will feel it, but I want people to realize that for themselves, that, yeah, it's so easy now to go to AI and have it write things for you. And it was funny because Hay House, the publishers, has added to their contracts now, you will not use AI in writing your book, which is great, because the author had better write the words. But I laughed and I wrote to them and I said, I have to use AI for this one experiment. So let's put a little addendum in there for that one experiment. So that was funny. But that's all it was. Oh, what was interesting was my guides gave me words from a poem about forgiveness that I had forgotten, that they gave me 18 years ago. And in the AI version, brought out lines of the same poem, which had been inputted into, by my assistant, into the system. But I felt that was a God wink saying, yeah, you can get the same information, but what's missing is that personal connection. And it's right here.
Yeah. And I also too have been going through very deep conversation with my AI and having these beautiful responses. But then I stopped for a moment and I said, when I ask this question, am I first going to myself or to my computer screen? And the guides, Sanaya, they say that problems occur when you take your role so seriously that you forget your higher self. And the key word there, forgetting our higher self. And you said you were touching upon that, going even deeper when we are in that space of receiving information, wisdom, knowledge, and we go first to the AI, what problems can occur that isolate us from this connection that we have with the greater reality?
Well, a good friend of mine, Lynette Setzkorn, made a point with me when we were having this discussion the other day. And she said many people are using AI now as their personal therapists, and it can be very helpful. They build you up, they appeal to the ego, no doubt about that. But she said AI will miss the subtleties that a human, sentient, higher soul might miss, such as, I'm feeling suicidal, and the therapist may say, well, let's talk about that, the AI therapist. But then if the person types in, what are the highest bridges in my city? The AI will come back and give you the locations of those bridges, because it doesn't know the subtleties that mean, because I want to find the highest one to jump off of. See, there's this this level of sentience that gets the nuances.
Oh.
Yeah, see? Interesting thoughts.
Yeah. It's interesting as well because if we go back to that notion of us being tuning forks, can we, in a sense, utilize our tuning forks and our consciousness to bring more awareness to the technologies that we utilize in our daily life?
That's an interesting question. We don't use the tuning fork to change anything. The tuning fork just is. And it will reflect that what it's radiating to others. So the goal is to just be the highest possible tuning fork. It's more of an interior thing. Make sense?
Yeah, definitely. The last time we spoke on this show, we brought up to the surface this vision that you had of a grid lighting up Christ consciousness throughout the world. I'm wondering if that vision, if maybe you can also summarize it here, how that's shifted in what you've seen in the last few years that has maybe activated more of that grid. How are we doing in the activation of the grid system?
Right.
And yeah, anything else that you've seen with that?
That's one key that's missing from the movie Wolf's Message that I talk about in the book. During the time that Wolf was coming to me, I woke up one morning and heard the phrase from higher consciousness, stellated dodecahedron. And it shocked me because that's quite a mouthful and not something that the Suzanne story had ever heard before. And then my guides pointed to a stack of books beside my bed that I had just brought back from a bookstore, hadn't dived into yet. And they said, you'll find that term in that book right there. And when I did, I actually cried because that showed a level of connection that I'd been dreaming of. So I looked up stellated dodecahedron. It's, of course, a shape within sacred geometry. It's a pattern, geometric pattern, that allegedly this Christ consciousness grid around our earth is in the shape of. A dodecahedron with a point in the middle of each of the decahedrons. It gets a little complicated, but it's a very high vibe pattern. And imagine it like an electric grid. Right now, it's kind of dim, the light of it. It's not a whole lot of power coming from humanity as a whole is powering it up. But as each one of us, this is an analogy, as each one of us realizes who we are, our light of consciousness shines brighter and we contribute to the grid. We light it up brighter. And so there are whole portions of the grid that are even dimmer than others. And then there's the group of people who are awakening that help add to the light. So I have talked to several people who have actually, in moments of lucidity, seen that grid with their bare eyes, like glittering over the earth. But within each one of us is a grid. That's our soul's pattern, our divine blueprint. It was really interesting that I had a healing with a healer recently. I love to try energy work. It's, to me, fun to experiment and see what they come up with. And this gentleman identified a spot in me that was a dense spot of dimness from my first marriage that I didn't realize I've been carrying around for 30 years. And he removed it. And he said, you'll feel a tenderness right here, 4 inches above the navel, below the heart, right in between. And I did. It was tender. And he showed me how to heal that and fill it with light. Well, just last week, which is only about a month after that healing, I was gifted a session with a craniosacral therapist who senses energy flow in the body. She said, wow, there's a whole team of healers here, and they're working on you right here. The same spot where the guy took out the dense energy. This sounds ridiculous, but when you realize that consciousness flows in patterns, I suddenly had the image of this grid-like structure within all of our energy fields. And if you can imagine a place where the structure is weak or even broken, this team of healers she sent showed me they were just shoring up that grid, shoring it up, making it more powerful. And I just did a reading yesterday. The flow was off the charts. So I say to everybody, whatever you can do to identify traumatic blocks in you, dense energy caused by your own human thoughts, clear it out, fill it with light, and see how that improves your connection with higher consciousness.
And basing off of the as above, so below, as within, so without principle, if there's a dodecahedron around ourselves and there are teams of helpers that come in and help go into those darker spaces, does that mean then that where there are dimmer spots on the planet right now, there's a few wars going on, does that mean there are teams of helpers also present there? And how do we know this? Yeah.
We don't know it. We intuit it from the soul level, and we pray for it because it's all connected. Prayers. I have an app called the Awaken Way app. And 2 days ago, the message I got from my guides, which I post every day on the app, was about prayer and the efficacy of it, because it shows that we recognize there are higher beings who will help us. We reach out to them. They respond. It's all about love. This message got so many likes. It's very clear that people realize we're connected and that prayer makes a difference. So we pray, really, not so much for help because the help is there, but we pray to acknowledge that we're part of a bigger web. And we pray that those who are blinded to who we are will feel the soul's nudging from within and align with it. Because many times people that make choices that are less than positive or conduct evil actions are doing so because they're completely blinded to the light within.
How does that blindedness or blockage from the light within occur in the first place for most people?
It occurs exactly for the reason we were talking earlier. We get caught up in the story, and we pay attention to the clouds that are running around in our field, the clouds that are clouding our awareness, blocking the light. These are all analogies, but they're so apt because it's really easy to picture that. This calm center is there, but you don't see it because you're focusing on the clouds, on the story, believing these false stories, elements out there that often are picked up by entire cultures.
What is the truest story of humanity?
Love is. It all comes back to love. Love is total connection. Love is lack of separation. That's the field. That's why we say God is love, because it's this unified field where there's no separation. That's love. I mean, we can get funny about it and say, when you fall in love with someone, oh my God, they can do nothing wrong. I love everything about them, right? And then the differences start to show up. And then you start focusing on the differences and you fall out of love. Where we focus on truth and beauty and the innate aspects of the soul, we stay in awareness that love heals, because it's what connects us all.
You brought up the innate aspects of the soul. I'm wondering if you could put words to that. I know it's a difficult question to ask, but what are the innate aspects of the soul?
It's not difficult at all, because your soul knows them. It's we humans who have to put labels on them. But I encourage anybody who wants to remember who you are to go to my website, SuzanneGiesemann.com. There's a gifts page on the main menu. And if you scroll down, you'll find a recording called Journey of Remembrance. It's completely channeled. I was invited to be in a music studio with a man who channels music and just channel a message from my guides. And for 32 minutes, out came this journey to remind us we are souls. And it brought up 7 innate aspects of the soul and went through each one. There are times when I get caught up in the story, maybe because I've interacted too much with other people who are lost or blinded, and I remember one time I just, for no reason, felt so depressed and could not pull myself out of it. I did a chakra clearing exercise. I meditated, and I was just depressed. And I heard, listen to the journey of remembrance. I took a chair and went and sat by some water. 32 minutes later, not only was I back, I was better than before because I'd allowed the soul to come back. And the aspects are joy and peace, strength, courage, humility, gratitude, and of course, love. And those are the 7 that my guides focused on for that beautiful experience. There are more, but it's when the soul just says, when you feel those. But I found it very interesting that strength and courage are innately part of the soul. But when you think about it, thinking is a human head, but when you think about it, it makes sense. If you did not fear death, because the soul knows there is no death, then fear goes away. So courage is innate. Right? There's nothing to fear. Strength is here because we're already connected to the source of all wisdom and all those other aspects. So that's our innate strength, which is why people who are hurting don't want to hear you're never given more than you can handle. But you are handling it. In that moment of great depression, it's like, why am I even here? But I had the strength to grab my chair and put it next to the water. And then I got this beautiful reminder. And that's just a teeny little answer. I've been through the death of my stepdaughter. We all have our own personal tragedies. And here we are because of that strength that brought us to this moment here. And then you find the gratitude for remembering who we are. And that changes everything.
It's a different type of strength is what I'm seeing, because in the earthly human realm, we might define or measure strength by how much weight we can carry at the gym, or how many, bullets we can take metaphorically. How does the soul view strength when it's not in a physical body? Does that make sense? The question.
Yes. In that recording, when I looked up as you were talking, I heard them say in my ear, you have the strength to move mountains, which is metaphorical. But once you realize the power of consciousness, you no longer need to move mountains. You simply stand as love. That's the tuning fork. It gets really deep, but I led a cruise to the Mediterranean last year, and my guides had me dissect that journey of remembrance transcript line by line, and then we all listened to it with the music. We had 4 spontaneous, miraculous physical healings take place in the audience during that time. One woman that came on board with a walker, taking pain medication, left the ship without her walker, was pain-free and remains so. That's the tuning fork. See? Aligning with the soul and the higher energy that's present when we make the space for it.
When you tell that story, I immediately think about all of the walking masters that have been on this planet that were able to know themselves to such a high degree that they could perform these miraculous acts and performances, to say that, for lack of a better word. But when the soul said, we have the strength to move mountains, obviously that's metaphorical, but we have extraordinary latent capabilities that are within us. So what do you see a planet transforming and a species transforming when the majority of the population know themselves to that degree?
Well, I feel that we're not here to change the world all at once, that Source is enjoying, I say it that way because I call Source joy, enjoying this process of evolution, one light at a time, lighting up at its own rate. My new book that just came out, Making the Afterlife Connection, it's a journey from doubt to knowing death is not the end. When we know from the soul that we don't die, yes, the body does, it takes away fear. It causes us to look at each other differently, to see the soul in each other. This process of connecting with higher consciousness, making the connection, is a journey. And it's a journey of peeling back the layers like an onion, one layer after another. Here I'm making really good connections with higher consciousness and didn't know for 30 years I've been carrying around this one block that I talked about earlier. That was cleared, and I now feel my stepdaughter, Susan, who passed, all the time, right here. I feel Wolf all the time right here. They're not bothering me and I'm not bothering them. But if I need them or they need me, boom, instantaneous. And I know she's been here. And I could connect with her with effort and going into meditation before. But with that block cleared, that's the instant result. So my question is, what other blocks are in here? That's the journey. We don't know how much we can open up to. But each round around this spiral of evolution that we're all on, our individual paths, part of a much greater spiral of humanity opening up to higher consciousness, can be joyous. It's not always. There's a lot of pain, but that's part of the wholeness. So I pray every day, bring on the miracles, but may my lessons be as painless as possible. Right?
And also what I'm hearing is that the more we let go of our internal blocks, the more the divine can freely flow through each and every one of us. And we can have these experiences of miracles, synchronicities, what we've talked about. And it has to start with us looking really what is holding us back.
Exactly.
What do you feel holds most people back or blocks most people that isn't allowing this flow that you're talking about to emerge?
Identifying with the story as who they ultimately are rather than realizing it's a story. I laughed when you first started that question because the daily message today that is in the app is about emptying out. This noticing what thoughts are triggering me. What thoughts do I constantly go back to? The shoulds and the have tos and the musts. That's all part of the story. Emptying that out and just being and listening and flowing. Flow is an indicator that you're in alignment with your higher self. And it's interesting that flow is wolf spelled backwards.
It is.
It is.
Flow like water.
Yeah.
Flow like water. When was the last most memorable time that you took a sip of the divine?
Well, the sip of the divine is just a 3-minute practice. So I don't do it that often because my meditations are usually about 20 to 30 minutes every day. But the sip of the divine is a great way for people who make excuses. I don't have the time to meditate or I can't quiet my mind. So what's so beautiful, it's only 3 minutes of sitting in stillness, but watching the mind and asking a question such as, who am I? Or what do I need to know now? So I laughed when you said that because the most memorable recent one was when I said to my guides in those 3 minutes, put something in my hand that's meaningful. And it comes in the mind's eye, of course. But I held out my hand like that in this 3 minutes of stillness. Put something meaningful. And the image that popped up, Emilio, was a roll of toilet paper. So it made me laugh because it fit the bill of how do I know this is not my imagination? Because that's the last thing I would have imagined. So I know it's from higher consciousness. Now you pull the string. All right, why? Why a roll of toilet paper? And the guide said, because the paper cannot exist without the empty core that is within it. You, your true self, is this core. The body is just the form around the so-called emptiness. That core is within all. That core is what connects all beings, all creatures, all creations. Find the core in you, and everything else follows. Isn't that cool? That was a little insight from 3 minutes. And it brings levity to what is a really deep and powerful, meaningful analogy.
That is the most spiritual definition that we could conceive of for toilet paper.
Yeah.
Such a deep message there. Like, I would have never imagined to see in it that way. And, you know, when we utilize our toilet paper, when we let go of the stories, we just have the core.
That's
and
right.
Our first thought is to replace it with a new one. And what about, instead of replacing it with a new one and put on more stories and more toilet paper, we just hold the core of the toilet paper and realize it for what it is.
I don't know if you're in a relationship, but if somebody shouts at you, "Why are you in the bathroom so long?" You say, I'm studying the toilet paper.
I'm meditating with my core. That's why I take an hour in the bathroom.
Yeah. But see, people will say, well, how do I know I'm not making up the answers I get? It's when they stand out and they pull the thread and it's meaningful. That's the connection. It doesn't have to be all serious.
Suzanne, what would you tell someone that is really overwhelmed because they feel that they're living in two worlds at once? One in the 3D earthly dimension and one in this greater vast reality that might be a little bit too much for our nervous systems to handle here.
That was Wolf. He was diagnosed schizophrenic, and he told me in his reading he was in two worlds at once. It was very busy in his head. And we have photos of him doing that. I just got an email this morning from a woman who has been labeled mentally imbalanced. There are often people who cannot function in this world and they need assistance. But many times it is because we're tapping into this whole field of energy. I tell people that, your loved ones are simply like a different TV channel. We set the intention to connect with them, those who have passed. We shift the channel and here they are. It's just a different frequency. So if for example, if you believe that the people on your TV screen are actually in the TV screen, that's like believing that we are permanently these bodies. So what happens if your TV breaks? Where does the signal go? It's still here. If this body breaks, where does the signal go? It's still here, but just at a different frequency that we can no longer sense. So it's actually a blessing that we can't tune into all of the signals that are around us right now. Every channel that exists, every octave, every dimension of reality is here in awareness. So people that are knocked off balance because it's too chaotic or they're too sensitive, to answer your question finally, can benefit by focusing on the breath, moving awareness to the still center here and finding that. Because even amidst the chaos, there is silence between the sound. We find that. Then when we come back into the chaos, we at least know there's a respite available for us.
We talked about earlier how we have the ability to engage with metaphysical teachers in the unseen realms. And how do we then differentiate between those messages that we're hearing from non-physical beings that can actually do something to help and guide our life versus ones that are leading us toward more distraction, maybe more distortion? What's the discernment there?
The discernment is your body is a wonderful instrument for that. Do you feel a clenching or even over excitement? Like, oh my God, I have to do this. I read a book by a woman who had schizophrenia and psychotic episodes, and she became manic and was convinced that the earth was filled with poison and people were poisoning themselves with every glass of water. That mania was a sign that she was out of balance. Whereas also there's a clenching in the body with fear. that's not aligned. When you get guidance that is aligned with the soul, and you take a deep breath to center yourself, there is that alignment with those innate aspects we talked about earlier. So you take the inner guidance you're getting or something that somebody outside you is telling you to do, and you test it literally in the heart. You go to the core in the most calm state you can engender, and you test it. Can I feel calm about this? And then you ask, do I act on this? If you're calm and you're not overexcited and you're not clenching, then act on it. There's an awareness. Is this going to cause harm? Then do not act on it ever. But as long as it has the potential to be helpful and does no harm, you act on it, and then you'd see, how did that help? Did that result in flow? And then you just follow that process.
Has there ever been a non-physical teacher that guided you deeper into your purpose and what you were meant to do here in this time, in this lifetime?
Every day, every moment. Jesus is a great one. He comes to me actually often. I have videos called The Miracle of Christ Consciousness that shows why I so strongly trust that this is Christ consciousness helping me here. That's my path. Loving kindness and compassion. That's my lineage, right? Other people might have different purposes, but he was a great teacher of that and a model of that. That's my tuning fork.
What does Christ consciousness feel like? How do you identify it?
Unity is the word that comes to mind. Just this oneness, this knowing of that lack of separation, the love, forgiveness. I'm just filled with this overwhelming awareness that this story of Suzanne is so very loved, and that love is within each person if I see beneath their stories. When he's one of the first visits when he came to me, I just wanted to go out and wash everybody's feet. I walked past a homeless shelter, and there were a bunch of men hanging out on the benches, and it was just like, oh my God, how can I help them? It was this urge that I'd never felt before. That was the lingering energy of awareness of oneness. That's what Christ consciousness is, no matter what your religion is. It means one who knows they are one with all. So get rid of the stories that go with the being known as Jesus the Christ, and tap into the energy of Christ consciousness. That's why we call it the Christ consciousness grid around the earth. Unity, awareness. We are all part of one field of awareness. And where there is no separation, that's love. Love thy brother and sister as thyself. I was raised with no religion, but that phrase makes sense to me now because they are all part of the same field I am. We all share the same core.
I'll just share a question that just came to me in that explanation of how we can attune ourselves into those states of Christ consciousness. And that is, can you ask yourself in those moments when you're around other people or in nature, how can I see myself in this other? And put other in quotes because that's the illusion of the quote. But how can I see myself in this other person?
I would go back before you get into that situation and ask Christ consciousness to fill your very being and become very still and just see what shifts you feel. Because first we need to experience what it feels like to see it in others. So that's the key, the personal experience. So ask for that. And then you'll naturally start to see it in others because you'll realize if it's in the core of me, it's there as well.
Beautiful. Suzanne, we end every show with a segment called The Final Trio. But before that, I would love to give you the space to tell us what is going on in your life that you would like to share And also, where would you send people to connect with your work even further?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of it. The Wolf's Message documentary is available on Gaia TV. It's video on demand for anybody on wolfsmessage.com. And on that same website, you can see where you might join me live for a screening, because we're still on tour through November of 2025. And then, of course, I have the new book, Making the Afterlife Connection. That's one of 15 books, so check them out. Go to my website, SuzanneGiesemann.com, and see what jumps out at you, because I have a lot of resources there, a lot of gifts, a lot of free stuff. And I do monthly webinars where we attune to this energy. I channel my guides with a healing transmission. I share the latest evidence, the stories that help us open our belief system. So those monthly connection webinars are a great way to get a sense of community with like-minded souls and feel the love and raise your vibration and learn a thing or two. So SuzanneGiesemann.com and wolfsmessage.com. And my YouTube channel, over 500 videos of hopefully helpful information and high vibes.
And we'll provide all the links that you just mentioned in the description, and really recommend people to watch that documentary. You will become part of the web that we are talking about. You'll see wolves everywhere. You'll see lightning. You'll see all these different things. I was initiated into it, and I've been seeing some crazy stuff. Anyways, for the final trio, the first question I have for you is, what do you feel Earth is trying to teach the human soul right now that only this level of global intensity could deliver?
Sometimes things have to be shaken up before they change. We need a wake-up call. It's here. Pay attention.
Yeah. We do. What is something Spirit taught you that you didn't believe at first, but now you live by?
Oh, angels are real. It's a chapter in my new book, but I didn't believe in angels. I'm a retired Navy commander. I was aide to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I didn't go around talking to spirit guides and angels and archangels, and they have knocked my socks off with no other explanation moments. And now I turn to them first whenever I have a challenge, and it makes life fun and it flows.
If your spirit team or your A team, the above team, could broadcast the message into every human heart right now, what would they say?
They would say, you are never alone and you are so very loved.
The time of the lone wolf is over.
That's right.
Bringing it back full circle.
That's right.
Suzanne, it's been such a gift, a pleasure getting to know you. And I loved being with you in person. The two words that come to me when I think about you are integrity and heart. And very few people can merge those together in such a beautiful way that you do. And I just want to honor you and acknowledge you for that. It's such a gift. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Emilio. It was a joy to meet you in person too. My heart just went, wow. So great to
I'm tearing up actually. So it's thank you.